Does the result justify the process when it comes to benching Anthony Richardson and restoring him to the starting lineup? We talk about that today. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering the Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And you guys can start this season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Hello, everyone. I am Zach Hicks, your favorite film nerd over at HorseshoeHuddle.com. And I am joined today by Derek Schultz, who Jake wrote here in the thing, very special and handsome guest to talk about the Colts and their renewed hope. So, Derek, very special and handsome guest coming on the show. Welcome back, man.
So are you just reading what Jake said, Zach, or do you feel that way about me too?
You are very handsome. I don't know about this whole special thing, but very, very handsome for sure.
No, man, thanks for having me. It's great. It's great to come on here after a win because now we can be like smiling and happy. And we have some fun and hopeful things to talk about, I think, on today's show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're talking hopeful stuff, but we kind of have to wind the thing back a little bit because you and I, we're realists. We're professional yappers, like we say. And we just have to kind of talk about like just this whole process to get here. Like, because right now, we're so excited about the result of what just happened this past Sunday. And I don't know if it's going to be a one-off thing. I don't know if this is just who Anthony Richardson is. I really hope this is just who he is going forward because the Colts might have their guy. But let's talk about the whole process here because the Colts were at 4-4, heading into a brutal stretch of games, which we all acknowledge was a really tough stretch. The Vikings, the Bills, the Jets obviously weren't super tough, but they gave up a good fight against the Colts this past weekend, and now the Detroit Lions coming up this week. The Colts made the decision to bench Anthony Richardson, whether that was performance-related, off-field related, whatever it was. They weren't super straight with us throughout the whole process here. Very chaotic process. Two dud of performances by Joe Flacco. Go back to Richardson, and he looks like this new, refreshed, rejuvenated quarterback. So, Derek, I got to ask you the very tough question. The process seemed chaotic, very out of control, and it felt like they had no clue what they're doing. But if they somehow had make this thing work, where Richardson is the guy now after this little benching, does that justify the process? Were they just smarter than us, Derek? And it's a tough question to put on your plate here, but were the Colts smarter than us, Derek, if this works?
Yeah, I think the follow-up is does anybody care? As long as they were right, great, right? And that's how I feel too. I don't care. Use the word chaotic and clueless. I think all those things are true, even if this ends up working. I think the Colts are just making plans on the fly. They did not expect to go back to Anthony Richardson after 13 days after benching him. I don't care what anybody says. You don't get markedly better in 13 days. And I also don't care what Shane Steichen says about Joe Flacco's play not factoring in the decision. Of course it factored in the decision. The offense, the floor of the offense was supposed to be raised with Joe Flacco. Instead, the floor caved in, against Minnesota and against Buffalo in their two worst offensive performances of the season. So absolutely, I think that factored in. But, the way that I looked at it, Zach, is that I agreed with the team that Anthony Richardson best improves from being out there and getting reps for a guy that just doesn't have a lot of meaningful playing experience on any level, much less the professional level, the highest level that there is in the National Football League. So that's how I felt. I would not have benched him for that. And I've heard the counter arguments. I even had somebody ask me, hey, do you think they benched him because they knew Buffalo and Minnesota were tough, so they threw Flacco to the Wolves? And I'm like, why would you punt 2 games when you're fighting for your lives in a playoff race, right? You of course, wouldn't think about it that way. So I don't think that the Colts have covered themselves in glory as far as how they've done this yo-yoing at quarterback and this entire thought process. I think they got maybe a little panicky. Then again, we don't have all the information at hand. If they really were concerned with something off the field and they wanted to nip it in the bud, maybe that's what this is and they can move forward from it. But I think best case scenario here, Zach, regardless of how you feel about the process or how the Colts have handled this, if this little sabbatical, timeout, whatever you want to call it, for 2 weeks, not only sort of recalibrated Richardson, but recalibrated this coaching staff, where they took a step back and they said, look, this isn't working for him. This isn't working for us. How do we fix this? Because we a lot of the focus on Anthony Richardson making changes. And we would agree, Richardson was not playing well, right? He needed to make some changes. Colts needed to make some changes too. And you saw some of those in Sunday's game. So I do think that this was this breather. I'm just going to keep making up words as I go for whatever this 2-week thing was. This allowed everybody to just kind of take a step back, take a breath, and recalibrate and figure out a new path going forward. And hopefully that's more than just a 1-week thing and something sustainable for the team here moving forward.
Yeah, I completely agree. And look, guys, I'm not one to arrogantly stay in my lane, that whatever lane I picked, I'm not going to just stay in that no matter what. If I'm going to change my opinion as things go. And at the time when they benched Richardson, as someone who has followed the NFL my entire life, typically they don't go back to bench quarterbacks. So for me, that was the end of this experiment. They were done with it. And it was such a unique experience for me and for most of us. I mean, look, when a quarterback gets benched, especially as a young guy, it's usually it for that guy. You typically don't see them reinserted in the lineup. And to give the Colts credit, maybe this was a last-ditch effort that they had. Maybe that was he spiraling on the field. Maybe he was spiraling off the field. And this was kind of the wake-up call he needed. Maybe it was, look, this kid taken top 4 in the NFL draft a couple years ago at 20 years old, just kind of needed that kick in the butt to say, like, look, it's not given to you. You're not guaranteed this spot. Maybe that's all it took to get Richardson in the doors at 5 a.m. every single morning, to get him talking with quarterback coaches more. Again, I'm just speculating here. Maybe that's what they need to do. So the Colts were certainly in a better position to know than we were. I think we were justified in our evaluation of the process, the way it was presented to us. But look, if it works out, I will be clapping for hours straight for Chris Ballard. I was screaming Chris Ballard's name in jubilation. Like, thank you for getting, because if you get the quarterback, it does, like, I know it's always process over results, but when it comes to quarterback, it's results. It's results. It's results. It's results. Just get me the results. I don't care about the process to get there. Look at the San Francisco 49ers with Brock Purdy. Do you think they care about the process of giving up all those picks for Trey Lance if they still got Brock Purdy in the end? No. It doesn't matter. If you get your quarterback, you get your quarterback. The Patriots didn't know what they were getting when they took Tom Brady, but the results are great. The results are awesome. So as long as this works out for the Colts, and again, I'm not proclaiming that this is working out for the Colts because they benched him. I will say this, though. What the game I watched on Sunday from Anthony Richardson was drastically different from not only anything I saw from him earlier this season, but anything I even saw from him last season. He looked in control that entire game. I know there was the fumbled snap and the fumbled play in the pocket. Like, mistakes happen. He's still young and he's still learning. But even with the couple mistakes in this game, he just looked like an NFL quarterback out there. Like, do you agree, Derek? Like, he just looked different out there.
Yeah, I think he looked confident and comfortable, and he hasn't always looked that way. I mean, if we were to play out a game script here, and I was going to tell you that Jonathan Taylor would rush for 57 yards on 24 carries, and Anthony Richardson would have to lead back-to-back 70-yard touchdown drives in the fourth quarter, you would not have been feeling great about the Colts' chances, right? That was not the script. That was not what they wanted to do with him in his first game back after being benched. But that's how it ended up playing out, and they won the game because of him. And I think that's, it wasn't anything the defense did. In fact, the defense was awful from about the 2-minute mark of the second quarter on. They won because of him and some heroic efforts from the receivers as well. I mean, Downs and Pierce, et cetera. But I think that everything that they did for him, even if, running Jonathan Taylor into a brick wall and getting a yard or two into the teeth of the Jets defense who were selling out for the run, I think it helped that comfort level and the designed runs, right? Like, I think part of the problem that the Colts ran into was that I think they were overly coddling him this year. And a lot of people say, people were mad about the tap out. The tap out happens because Richardson in his mind thinks that, okay, yeah, I'm tired. I'm going to come out for a play. And the Colts are going to be cool with that because they've been cool with everything else, right? You have to get this guy out and run. And if he has to lower his shoulder into a defender to get over the goal line, cool, fine, great. And that blows out his shoulder, whatever. Like, I think you just have to live with the risk because it's such a high-end trait for him, his ability to run and his ability with the legs and throwing on the move and all these things that they were able to do. So I loved everything about Sunday's game. Maybe they were a little too stubborn about the run game, but overall, again, Zach, at this point with the Colts, so much of this regime has been, well, the process is good. Well, the process is good. Well, and you never get the result, right? Sunday, I'm not sure the process was always that great, but the result was. And I think at this point, that's really all I care about with the Colts.
Right. Like at the end of the day, you want process and result to be great. But if I had to pick between the two, just give me the result, baby. Like I know that's horrible for like all the math nerds watching are be like, oh, no, Zach, that's awful. But at this point in this regime, like you said, like we're in year 8 of Chris Ballard. You're not, I don't even know. I add a year every time I think about it. I think we're late into this Chris Ballard era. We need results. And if benching Richardson got him to being the quarterback he showed on Sunday, and that's what he's going to show the rest of the year, I will take that result even if the process to get there was chaotic. Now, don't do it again, but hopefully you don't ever have to do it again because he's this. So we are going to talk a little bit about Shane Steichen coming up here in just a second, though, where Shane Steichen, again, like you said, he kind of looked like he did some soul searching and changed a little bit of the offense to take some of the pressure off of Anthony Richardson and lean into what he does best. So we're going to talk about that here in just a second. But first, pre-alcohol probiotic drink by ZBiox is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's the blame for the rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make ZBiox your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Guys, I think I speak for a lot of y'all listening. I'm not 21 anymore. It's hard to get up the next morning, regardless if it's 1 drink or 2 drinks or 3 drinks. It is difficult for me the next morning just because I'm older now. I can't do what I used to be able to do when I was younger. So ZBiotics is something that just makes the next morning easier, and I can be productive, whether it's work or just hanging around and doing chores or anything around the house. So here's how it works. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol for best results. Make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly, pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. And step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiox.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. ZBiox is backed with 100% money-back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiox.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. And also, guys, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. FanDuel has the lines as 7.5-point favorites in this one. So if you are just drinking that Anthony Richardson Kool-Aid, make sure you're placing all your money on the Indianapolis Colts at home against the Detroit Lions. So just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, Locked On Colts Everydayers, we're back with Derek Schultz. We're still talking Anthony Richardson's big Sunday performance, and we have to shift the conversation a little bit here to Shane Steichen. And I think you said it perfectly in the first segment there, Derek, where, Shane Steichen kind of got a little bit of a pass with Anthony Richardson's struggles in the first half of the season, especially in terms of national attention, where, again, Richardson was not playing well. It is very easy to see that Richardson was not playing well, but I think a good bit of it was Shane Steichen was also not calling the best offense for him. It was a lot of leaning on Richardson as a passer, especially as a vertical passer. I mean, we all saw that week 1 game against the Houston Texans where they weren't calling anything under 10 yards down the field. They weren't calling anything under 20 yards down the field in that one. They were really leaning into that big arm, and they were kind of taking away a little bit of the QB run game to protect him and maybe, in a sense, like you said, coddle him a little bit. And it became this passing-heavy offense where they're asking him to make full-field reads that he clearly wasn't ready for. And you saw inconsistency, you saw struggles, and you saw, again, him just pressing in a lot of these games. So, Derek, I'm not going to ask you to, put on your coach's hat and break down the All-22 film of this past game by any means and go really in-depth here. But the offense that you saw on Sunday, even if it was a bit repetitive with the run game, felt more so like we all kind of expected to see coming into this year, right?
Yeah, I think it was, and it's not like they weren't taking any downfield shots at all, right? I mean, the pass to Pierce that really kind of set up the game-winning touchdown was perfect, perfectly called, and a perfectly thrown ball, and a great play by Pierce to get, I think it was Sauce Gardner, right, to bite on it, and 33, 34 yards, whatever it was. So I still think that you can keep that arrow in your quiver, because clearly he's a great deep ball threat when it's there, right? It's just, kind of throwing, the YOLO balls, the entire game, it can be tough. And for as much people wanted to point at the completion percentage, I think some of that, at least a good chunk of that, had to do with the fact that they were being very aggressive with the throws that they were asking him to make. I mean, it just wasn't an offense where you would be completing 70% of your passes. Just weren't. If you were, you're going to be throwing for 700 yards probably, because that's, kind of how it was going. So I think really the run game and the element of him and Richardson is where the Colts can really kind of unlock this thing. You wish that they had some starter level tight end play, which unfortunately they just don't. They've got a room of guys who are backups essentially. And they're fine at what they do, but that's it. They're just meh. They're, whatever. The good news is that you've got Downs emerging now as a clear number 2. And even he can step in as a number 1 with Michael Pittman Jr. being banged up as he is. And Alec Pierce can do the one thing that he does great. And, if he's going to catch 2 balls for 80 yards every game, hell yeah, sign me up. Like it's great to have that. That's a real weapon to have as your 3rd or 4th guy. So I think there's a lot to like about, I've never really lost faith in the offense. Now, the line and the injury situation with Will Fries and the whole deal, the interior of the line, which really got beat up against the Jets, right? They were manhandling them up front. That's an element that I wasn't expecting. But I think overall, I've always kind of appreciated the potential of this offense. Not that it could be like a top 5 offense, but I think it can still be good. And I think you saw some of that in how they called Sunday's game. And I'm hoping that the defensive level will be a little bit better than what we saw. That was their worst game probably since the Jacksonville game in week 5 overall.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think when you look at this offense too, another really good element, and again, analytics people are going to kill me for this, but the Colts were running so heavily in this game that it led to so much play action. And they leaned into the play action with Anthony Richardson. 17 of his 30 passes were off of play action throws in this game, which was his highest percentage of the season. And it's something he's always excelled at. He's been a much better play action passer than he was a just standard drop back passer in college. Like really the only other thing you can do with him is maybe some pistol stuff and some empty personnel stuff where that ball's coming out quick. So if you want to take longer developing plays, he's much better with play action. And the Colts leaned into that in this game. So much play action because they ran the ball 400 times with Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor might be in the ice bath as we speak right now because he's so banged up. And it would help to have a second running back that was capable of running on Sundays aside from Jonathan Taylor. But I do think this is kind of the process that you want to go with here is hopefully you can run a little bit better going forward. Maybe you can take even fewer quarterback runs outside of the red zone where you're not having to use Richardson as the battering ram just to get the 4 to 5 yards that you need to start off drives. But running the ball like this and leaning into, like, I don't even want to say like a Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts offense because it really wasn't that. It wasn't a super gimmicky game plan. It was just, we're going to run, mix in some QB runs, and then we're going to hit you with some play action stuff over the middle and deeper down the field. And we saw, Richardson was 7 of 7 on intermediate passes in this game, between 10 and 19 yards, 7 of 7 for like 150 yards in this game. He was just lethal in the middle of the field. And that's because you run the ball so much that those linebackers are fitting, you're doing play action, and you're hitting over the middle. So this kind of felt like, again, just leaning into what Richardson does well. And I give Shane Steichen, like, for how much it's like the Gus Bradley conundrum, where early in the season when he's struggling, we all want to pile on and say he's brutal. Just same with Shane Steichen. When he's struggling, you want to say he sucks. But when they have a good game like this, you got to also praise that. This was a good called game from Shane Steichen, and it led to Anthony Richardson's best game of the season.
Yeah, and that's what's exciting about this whole thing is that it almost feels like, and look, is Richardson just going to go out and throw for 272 and 20 of 30, 3 tuds every single week? No, right? He's not going to do that every single week, but it just feels like all of this is everything's back on track now, right? I almost feel like the Colts are where they were entering Lambeau in week 2 again, where I'm like kind of optimistic and excited about what the offense can be again, even though I know the Houston game was a differently called game than what we saw here on Sunday. The only play call that I really had a problem with Steichen was the 2-point conversion, just running Taylor. I thought it was awful. It wasn't there all day. I don't know why that was the call. I would have just gone to Richardson again and let him do something cool, right? Even if it fails, at least it's going to be cool. And that was the only one that I really had a problem with. Normally I don't love, again, running into a brick wall like that, but I think it set up some other things. And the players talked about it afterwards in the locker room that they thought that it gave him a lot of comfort and a lot of confidence in Richardson. So I'm bullish again about where they can go from here. Like, look, Detroit is a huge test and they are just rolling people right now. But you look at the finishing stretch of this schedule, if they can implement an offense and be as effective as they were against a bad Jets team, against a bad Giants team, a bad Titans team, a bad Jaguars team, a bad Patriots team, then you can really kind of start to see this come together. And in a very, very mediocre AFC, that should be enough to put them over the top for one of those final wildcard spots.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Derek mentioned it there. Where can this team go from here? And we're going to talk playoffs. We're going to talk playoffs coming up here in just a second. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in the loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? It's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Built is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month you pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points toward a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties. You can also use your points to book fitness studio classes, redeem them towards future rent payment. They're just designed to meet your lifestyle. So pay rent hassle-free through the Built Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Built points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guy and Bankrate. So earn points by paying rent right now when you go to join built.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure you use our URL so they know that we sent you. Join built.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points with your rent payments today. All right, guys. So Locked On Everydayers, we're back with Derek Schultz talking about the playoff possibility with this Indianapolis Colts team. And I think it's more realistic than some people think. I also think it's less realistic than some people think when you look at this final stretch. So the final stretch of games here, and just for perspective, I think the Colts are sitting at 5-6 right now. My numbers are always off. So I think 5-6 is where the Colts are sitting at right now, heading into a massive game against the Detroit Lions. If we assume that you have to get to 10 wins to make the playoffs, which I think is a very fair assumption with how this AFC landscape is, they really only have the room to lose another game in here.
Yeah.
And they got the Detroit Lions this week, who are looking like the 2007 Patriots every single week. So if we assume that's the loss, they got to win out their final stretch of games against New England Patriots, Denver Broncos, Tennessee Titans, New York Giants, and Jacksonville Jaguars. That's very doable. The Colts this season, I believe they're 4-1 against teams with a losing record. Their only loss being at Jacksonville, which doesn't count. That's a fake game. It's not a real game.
Every year. Yep.
Yeah. And then they're 1-5 this season against teams with a winning record. They only play 2 teams with a winning record the rest of the year. A lot of teams with a losing record. Detroit Lions, again, that's a different type of opponent. Then that Denver Broncos game is essentially your playoff game as long as you take care of business the rest of the way. So I think it's realistic. It's also, again, a little bit tough with projecting given wins with this team, knowing what we know about this team. But I think I think there's a shot for this team, which is great.
Yeah.
I will take a shot, Derek.
Yeah, absolutely. The margin for error, like you said, is virtually zero. And it really comes down to that Denver game. You can lose 1 or 2, I think, down the stretch here, but it really can't be Denver. Because you look at the finishing stretches, Baltimore has and they're 2 games up, but they've got a really brutal finishing stretch. Denver's got a tough finishing stretch as well. Cincinnati losing to the Chargers, I think, helped because I think you're, essentially right now, mathematically speaking, it's basically 10 teams for 7 spots, but the bottom 2 teams are the Dolphins and Cincinnati, who are really in kind of a world of hurt with where they sit right now. So I think it's really about just getting over Denver. I think it's that simple with where we sit today. And I think that they can do that. And, the offense, again, if they've really unlocked something with Richardson here and they could get competent to good level quarter. They don't even need it to be great. I think they can do enough. I think this defense, Sunday's game aside, had really solidified itself over the last couple of weeks and played pretty good. They kept them in. That Minnesota game, for all intents and purposes, should have been like a 3-touchdown blowout. And it wasn't because of the playmaking that the defense made. So I do think that, this is a perfectly average to slightly above average football team. And that's in the AFC. That's all you kind of got to be right there in the playoff mix. So with the way this season has gone, the Colts could they be in better shape? Of course. Could they be in significantly worse shape? Yes. So I think I'll actually take it with this weird quarterback yo-yoing and all of that. I think they're actually in about as good of a spot that you could have hoped for, at least on paper.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, let's live out, this isn't even the nightmare situation, but I guess a nightmare situation to some people, because say they missed the playoffs, finished the patented 9-8 or 8-9, the dreaded middle of the road when it comes to Chris Ballard and this Colts organization. If they finish 9-8, say they lose to Detroit and lose to Denver, 2 winning teams, 2 playoff teams, and pretty much all their losses this season would have been to playoff teams.
Yep.
And then they take care of business against all these bad teams. Is that a positive 9-8 in your eyes? If Richardson doesn't play like he did this past Sunday, but close to it, like looks good,
yes,
looks fine, is that a positive 9-8
then yes.
for you?
Yes. I think what stunk about 9-8 last year was that it was with Gardner Minshew and he's not part of the future, so who cares? I think that's what stunk about last year. So yes, I think so much of this season, and I don't want to be that guy that just says, well, this season was only about Anthony Richardson's development. Look, I want to make the playoffs just like everybody else, right? And the Colts haven't made the playoffs very often here lately. But if they miss, will it be disappointing? Yeah, of course. But if Richardson plays well and buys another year, because that's really what it was. The people banging the table about 9-8, they want Ballard out and maybe they want Steichen out. Those guys are tied to the quarterback. So I think as long as Richardson is playing well, those guys stay kind of alive and safe. It's once you give up on Richardson and once that's done, God forbid that happens, that you talk about making a move in both of those situations. So I do think 9-8 can be positive as long as we see some hope for the future and some growth and some development from Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement. As long as, again, it doesn't need to look as good as it did Sunday, 300 total yards, 3 touchdowns, and an 8-point comeback victory in the fourth quarter. It doesn't need to look like that every week. That's unrealistic. But if it can look positive not even every game here, but just overall over this final 7-game stretch for Anthony Richardson, 9-8, 8-9, I won't be happy, but I'll be fine with it. I will be perfectly fine with it. I want playoffs as much as you guys do. But again, it's about Anthony Richardson right now, especially with how this weird season has gone. If Richardson can finish the year on a strong note, I will certainly take that right there. So I think that's all we have for today, guys. I do want to shout you guys all out for joining us each and every day. Derek, thank you for joining us today as well. And thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Now for your second listen, go view the new Locked On NFL with 2 shows every day. First, the Madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. And then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you guys don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, at Zach Hicks 2, and at Schultz975, all on Twitter. Locked On Colts is also on Blue Sky, as well as Derek Schultz is also on Blue Sky as well. So definitely check us out over there. Also subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.